Hey everybody, welcome to episode 85 of the Go Get Outside podcast. This is your host, Jason Milligan. Welcome back, welcome aboard. Welcome to the penultimate episode of season 4. And today, for the first time on the show, we are having a return guest. That's right, it is the return of Alden Anderson. Longtime listeners may remember him from episode 16, way back in season 1. I highly recommend going back, listening to a story about a person raised in a religious cult who left at the age of 21 to take his life into his own hands and discover the outdoors. He has also appeared other times on this program, including episode 31, the roundtable discussion about solo backpacking, and one of his stories was also featured in episode 68, so any longtime listeners should recognize the name Alden Anderson. Alden is presently 3 years into a 6-month trip across Europe and Asia, and presently he has settled for the time being in Hanoi, Vietnam, where he and his girlfriend are starting a business, introducing people to the culture of Vietnam and teaching them how to photograph and capture that culture. As much as Alden's last episode was about a person venturing out into society and discovering the outdoors and exploration, this episode is all about a person discovering people and culture and rediscovering his love for photography. We're going to delve deeply into what travel can teach people and what foreign cultures can teach you about yourself, about others, about society in general. As much as I miss having the dude around here, I'm glad that he is having all the experiences he is and learning as much as he is, and as you'll hear later, beginning to give back to the local community there in Hanoi as best he can. But before we get to that conversation, let me tell you about our sponsor. I'm sure most of you out there listening are familiar with the many subscription boxes on the market, and maybe you can't find one that is right for you, so I'm here to tell you about Wild Woman Box. It is a curated box for women who get out, get moving, get shit done. When you subscribe to Wild Woman Box, every month you will receive a box to your door with gear you can put to use right away on a weekend hike, fuel to keep you going, and products to take care of your body after you've been out exploring all day. The thing I like about this box is that it gives you the chance to try products that maybe you've looked at but never purchased, or products maybe you've never heard of. It's a great way to get a sense of those things available to you to use in the outdoors that might be beneficial in the future. If you're curious to see what's in their past boxes, you can always go to wildwomanbox.com or look for Wild Woman Box on Instagram. And if you want to subscribe right now as a listener to this podcast, I can help you get $5 off with the code GETOUTSIDE. So when you sign up, put that code GETOUTSIDE in there and get $5 off your subscription to Wild Woman Box. This show is all about trying to get you all outside, and Wild Woman Box is here to help do the same. So please support our sponsor. They help keep this show going. And with that, it's time to go listen in on my late night Skype call with Alden Anderson.
My name is Alden. I've been traveling around the world for about 3 years now, although I've been in Vietnam for a bit over a year, and now I'm teaching photography, working on some photography projects here in Hoi An in central Vietnam. It's a UNESCO heritage old town with obviously a lot of history.
Yeah, so you've been on the podcast in the past, and we talked about your upbringing and then how you got into the outdoors and all that stuff. So we can skip over all that. If people are curious, they can go listen to your previous episode. But I think we should go back to 3 years ago when you left on your quote-unquote 6-month trip to travel Europe and Asia. What was the plan there? Let's hear about how that came together, because I know you saved up money and all kinds of stuff. So what did that look like? How did you prepare for that?
In my mid-20s, so I'm 35 now, but so in my mid-20s, I kind of wanted to to travel the world, and I started saving up money. And so kind of over the years, I just, stockpiled money and kind of had a rough idea that I wanted to travel the world, or had a rough plan rather. I had a strong idea that I wanted to travel the world, but I had kind of just a rough plan, and I kept putting it off. And then it finally just I decided to do it when I had a job that was in the Mediterranean on a cruise ship. So we started in Italy, in Trieste, which is like on the eastern side of Italy. I was working for about 2 weeks on the cruise ship, and then we finished in Barcelona. So that's pretty much when the trip started. I've been saving up off and on for probably 7 or 8 years. And that kind of was like the launching point when I got off the ship in Barcelona in April 2016.
Yeah, and I can vouch that for a long time there, you spent money on pretty much one thing, which was gear of some nature. And then everything else, you would be like, nah, we don't need to eat there. They have $8 sandwiches. Let's go to In-N-Out so I can get a burger for $4.
Right.
And then I remember you also were like renting a room in somebody else's house because then rent was cheaper. So were you just like putting all the money you could put away that wasn't going to ropes and wetsuits and shit?
There were times when I was saving more than other times. I mean, there was actually 1 year where I was just staying on my friend's couch, and I didn't have a car for about a year, which in LA is pretty hard to imagine. So that year I saved up more than other years when I was spending lots of money on ropes and other gear. But it definitely was that singular focus in mind of traveling the world and, going out and seeing all these places that I had never seen before. Some years I saved more, some years I saved less, but I generally always saved something, and I could be somewhat frugal at times. But I tried to never be stingy, if I owe somebody something or, something like that, I'm going to pay them. But, for my own.
Yeah, I don't ever remember you being like, hey, why don't you buy me some food or anything like that?
Right.
No, it was never like you were trying to mooch off of people.
Right. But I realized that, if I cut back expenses like going out to drink and eating at restaurants, then you can save up your money so you don't have to rely on other people, or you have more financial independence so you can pursue your dreams more without week to week worrying about expenses. Or if you lose your job, you're out on the street, for example. So if, you save up some money, then you have more power to choose the job and stuff that you want to do.
Yeah, it's true too with the eating out thing, because you can easily spend $100 a week eating out, and then before you know it,
Yeah, it's crazy how much that adds up. I mean, here in Vietnam, I eat out all the time. It's like $1 for a meal.
Yeah, but I imagine your income is a little different there also. So that dollar doesn't go as far as it did, or it goes further, but you don't get as many, I would imagine.
Right. You can't charge US prices in Vietnam for sure. Yeah.
So let's talk about the plan, because for the longest time, you're like, yeah, I think I'm going to finally go to Europe for 6 months and just travel around. What was your initial plan? What did you think you were going to do for 6 months? And then at what point did it change?
Trying to put myself back in that mindset of 3 years ago. So I guess the plan was to just go for 6 months. Honestly, I didn't really know. There was no return flight booked. So I was kind of open for more, a longer trip, that is. So once I was out traveling, it just became kind of the norm. And it is addicting, because when you don't have any schedule and you don't have a return date or a job to get back to, you can just have these experiences of discovery and learning and seeing and trying new foods, meeting new people from different cultures. So and the other thing is the expense side of it. I'm pretty sure it's cheaper to travel the way we were traveling than to live in Los Angeles. So, I mean, you could go home and not have a job and probably be spending as much or more money than you would traveling the world.
Yeah, I've done the math on it, and living in LA, paying a typical price, it's cheaper than staying in a hotel every night, but it's not drastically cheaper. So if you were camping most of the time and staying at hostels, I could see where that would have been much cheaper than living in LA. The only problem is you just don't have an income at that point.
Yeah, exactly. So then in my case, working for those years and saving up money, the other thing I did was invest money in the stock market. And I should have done Bitcoin, man, and then gotten out right before. Honestly, I could have just stayed in LA. I had a great job. I had been working on films and live performances. The job that I had in the Mediterranean on the cruise ship was a great job, great boss. Some of the films I would go and travel and be paid to travel around, or the movie would be on location. So I'm going on location. So it was a good job. I had a good setup, but it always kind of bugged me. I always had this dream and this goal to travel and see and experience and learn and see these other cultures and places. So I had been saving up my money, so I was able to do that. And then once I did it, once I was out there, it just is a continuing thing. And it's not like I'm broke and need to come home. Yeah, I'm still like frugal and traveling pretty cheaply, but like I don't really have a draw to come back. I haven't yet.
Yeah, so once you got there, what'd you do? Like you started in Barcelona, you said, but where'd the trip take you? And was it sincerely one of those situations where you're like, well, we'll figure out where we want to go tomorrow? Or did you have a path in mind that you wanted to trace?
Well, first of all, it started out with I rented a car for a month. Mika and I went canyoneering most of the month, off and on. We drove and we were in northern Spain. So that part of the trip was kind of nailed down more or less. Like we could figure out which canyon we wanted to go to, but we had a basic idea of what we were doing. After that, honestly, it was like, wake up, which country do I want to go to? Where do we go next? And then, when I was on my own later, it was the same thing. It was like, I have a 10-year visa for China, but I have to leave every 2 months. Where am I going to go to? Oh, I'll take a train down to Laos. Okay, where should I go after? Oh, let's go here. There are days when you wake up and you're trying to figure out what country to go to next. Now that sounds like exciting and exotic, and it kind of is, but it can also be a little bit overwhelming or like have its own troubles associated with it. Like trying to figure out like, we need to leave Sri Lanka in 2 days. We don't have a flight booked, type of thing. I guess overall it's a great problem to have though. So I can't complain, but it definitely was like, which country do I go to next at times?
Yeah, so you started out in true Alden fashion, just kind of chasing the canyons. These were the first time you had gone to the European canyons, right?
Yeah, it was. Amazing stuff in northern Spain. We went and it was pretty high water in the Pyrenees. We met some friends out there and mostly it was Mika and I. Then we had our friend Thor, who we did some canyons with. But yeah, that was the first time I had done the European canyons. I'd done Hawaii canyons, but in Europe, that was the first time.
Yeah, so you were kind of just being guided by the canyons at first. So did you think like, oh, well, now I've done the canyons in Spain, maybe I should go do canyons in some other adjacent country like Greece or Italy or Switzerland or something? Yeah,
no, I definitely wanted to do more canyons. And that month ended up being, so far, has been the only month that actually in Hong Kong I did some canyons, just borrowed some gear. So here's the problem is when you're going canyoneering and you have a car, it's great because you can pile all your stuff in the car and drive around. Like we went to do canyons in Spain, France, and I think a couple in Italy, just on the border with France. But you have a car, it's great. You can haul like all the gear, a big duffel bag full of canyoneering gear, 200-foot rope, wetsuits, all the harness, helmets. But then once you don't have your car, what are you going to do? Like carry this giant bag of gear along with your tent and all your other stuff? It just is like logistically is impossible, or it would be very difficult rather to travel around the world with all your canyon gear. So I left it in Spain where it still sits hopefully unmoldy in northern Spain. So
yeah, let's talk about what you brought with you, because I know for me, the thing I always tell people if they're going to try to travel and they want to like jump around to different places is figure out how to just bring what you can fit in a backpack and it will be awesome. But as soon as you have to deal with luggage, it's going to be miserable. So what did you start with? And then what did you do with everything that you, like, I know you got rid of the canyon gear and left it in Spain. Did you have other shit you had to get rid of along the way?
Yeah. So, we spent 2 months in the Himalayas. We came directly from Sri Lanka to the Himalayas, slightly different climate.
Yeah, you can't carry clothing for every climate. That's a good point.
Exactly. So, for example, I bought a diving mask in Egypt and did the advanced diver certification. And then in Sri Lanka, we went diving. And then after that, I still have my PADI book for advanced certification, have my diving mask. I gave stuff away And then after Nepal, I flew to Hong Kong. So the Himalayas obviously were very cold, but coming back to Kathmandu from the Himalayas, it's like really hot. And, these down jackets and stuff you don't need. So I sent a package home. So that's pretty much, left some stuff in Spain, sent stuff home, I think in France, just like a few random things. Because, all that weight you have to carry around the world. And if you're not using something, you gotta get rid of it. That being said, I still have a friend who has like 2 kilos of my stuff in China. Another friend in China actually went back to the US and took some of the stuff with him. So a little bit scattered here and there.
And then you got a ton of crap in Scott Merrill's attic in Lancaster, California.
I know. So less is more. Get rid of crap is the moral of the story. And don't haul
But
around.
if you let your friends hold on to it, then you kind of didn't get rid of it because you feel like you can get it later.
Yeah. So looking back on it now, I wasn't planning on being gone this long, obviously. I should have probably gotten rid of most of that stuff and not had it like sitting there. So, now I need to sell my camera. Maybe should sell some of that rope. Yeah, and other stuff in there is just I should have dealt with that before I left and not stored it in a friend's closet or,
Well, I'm planning on putting that inReach to use when I do the JMT. So.
Oh, yeah. Do you have it?
Here there's some pot shots up there I can use later this year, too.
Yeah. What happened to the inReach? Did I give that to you?
No, Scott says he has one. I was talking to him the other day, and I was saying how I was going to get a Spot or an inReach or something, and he was like, why don't you just take Alden's? I got it right here.
Yeah, take Alden's. He's not using it. Yeah, I just thought about the inReach the other day. I don't know why. The inReach not being used. So perhaps Jason could use it on the JMT. It's the one, too, where you can text with it.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's not great in canyons, but in the open space of the JMT, I'm sure it's amazing.
So it sounds like you've got stuff in California, you've got stuff in China, you've got stuff in Spain, and you said France too, right?
No. Sent a package from France. I know. Maybe we shouldn't focus on like Alden's crap in different countries. This is a lesson Alden has learned as he's traveled: is like don't deposit crap in countries that you are probably not going to return to for a long time. Less is more. Travel with less and you will be much happier.
So is that what happened? Once you got rid of your stuff in Spain and lost the car, you just put everything in one pack and moved forward from there?
Yeah, and I actually have a picture of what I started with. I did one of those like lay out all your stuff pictures that have like gotten obnoxiously popular on Instagram and other sites.
Never seen one of those before. Not sure what you mean.
Yeah, I pretty much just left all the canyoneering gear there and just put everything in the backpack. So I had a pack and Mika had a pack. Now I had a tent and a sleeping bag and like cooking stuff, which we then ended up using on the Tour de Mont Blanc. We did that and used the tent a lot camping. It saved us from having to stay in the I forget what they call them, but like these big cabins with like tons of people. They're pretty expensive in Europe and Switzerland and stuff. And doing it with a tent was amazing. So that kind of the tent, the sleeping bag and the pad and the cooking stuff kind of added weight to the whole setup. So like I used the tent once in Vietnam, but I've been hauling it around the world ever since. I did use it in Hong Kong, which you wouldn't expect, right? In Hong Kong, like I used it a bunch of times in Hong Kong, at least like 5 to 10 nights in Hong Kong, camping on beaches and islands. But a tent and a sleeping bag is definitely something that you have to put a lot of thought into of where you're going to travel, because it adds some weight and bulk to your stuff for sure. If I didn't have the tent and the cooking and all that, then the pack would have been quite a bit lighter.
Well, I guess the good thing too is there were 2 of you at that point, so you could split up that gear.
Right, that's true. Yeah, like the water purifiers and stuff. So there's this concept called like stealth camping. I'm not sure if I've read that somewhere, but it's just something I've kind of done over the years where you can camp like in so many places around the world, even if there's like not camping or people don't camp there. You just have to kind of go in after sunset and leave, right in the morning if you're in an area that's more populated. So islands in the Adriatic Sea off the coast of Croatia, camping in an olive orchard and going in there in the dark and waking up first thing and getting out, and you just have more freedom. You don't have to book your hotel for, $30, $40 a night. So it kind of gives you more freedom and more options. But again, it depends on the country. Like China, I don't think I really camped at all. So yeah, it just depends on the country you go to.
Yeah, so let's see if we can trace your path. Let's see if you can remember, since it's been 3 years. You started in Spain. From Spain, you've ended up in Vietnam. Where have you been in between?
Let me pull up a map. I guess technically Alden started in Trieste. So I flew to Trieste. We had a ship from there. I was working at the time. The cruise ship sailed from Trieste. I believe the next port was Dubrovnik in Croatia. Amazing old town. And then we went to Athens. I saw Athens for like half a day. Then we returned to Athens later. Let me just trace the cruise ship through the Mediterranean. So Trieste, Dubrovnik, Athens, Crete, the small island country of Malta. All of these places that I just mentioned, I was able to get off while the cruise ship was docked and explore them around at least until like the early afternoon, and then get back on the ship and then work. Amazing boss. It was a great experience. However, after Malta, we were pretty much just busy, and I had to work until... It's a rough life, right? I had to work in... when you hit Sicily, and I think they stopped somewhere off the coast of Rome. So I didn't get off the ship again until we stopped in Barcelona. Oh, dude, you know, actually, I got pickpocketed my very first night in Barcelona.
Oh, let's hear about that.
Yeah, quick story. So I'm walking down the street, and this dude comes up to me and he says something about like dance lessons. And I'm like, what? Confused. And he like points up at the building. I'm like, what? I'm like looking up there, and then he grabs me from the side, laughing and smiling the whole time. He's not like, it's not a violent robbery. It's just a confusing situation. And then they're laughing. It puts you off your guard, because I think naturally when someone's laughing and having fun, you don't want to be mean to them. So he grabs me by the side and then puts one leg in front of my two legs, and then he puts his leg between my legs. Like he's standing next to me. So he puts his, let's say he's standing to my left, he puts his right leg like between my legs and kind of like wiggles it around. Not like in a sexual way. I don't know how this sounds like with the legs.
All right, so he sodomized you for a few minutes first.
So he's like basically standing next to me, putting his leg between my leg and like moving it around. It is just a ruse to grab my phone. He reaches in my pocket, grabs my phone, pulls it out. I feel him taking my phone out though, so I like feel my pocket and see it's gone and turn around like, hey, yell at him. And then he holds out my phone and starts laughing and then gives it back to me. I was just so shocked and confused, and it was gone in a second. You know, I kind of like grabbed him and he gave me my phone back. Maybe he saw that it was like a 5-year-old Apple phone, which is another way that I saved money. Always buying like 2 years ago's model from my friend. Yeah, so I don't know. He gave it back to me because I don't know. I caught him. Maybe he saw it was a crappy phone or it was the old model or something. But I was kind of shaken up after that, and I was very cautious.
So he didn't get away with anything? He didn't get any money from you or anything?
Nothing.
Oh, you were lucky, dude.
Yeah, I don't carry my money, or I didn't carry my money in my pocket at the time. Most of my pants were like cargo pants, and I would carry stuff in different pockets, zipped up. But actually, it was probably a good thing that happened, because that kind of put me on guard for the rest of the trip in Europe, because I was like very shaken up with that, and I was very cautious after that. And nothing actually got stolen. So maybe it was a good thing.
Yeah, it's funny. He kind of did you a favor in a weird way.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, for anybody that's ever been robbed or worse, I can totally relate. Even if like nothing really happens, I can only imagine what it must be like if something actually like you get hurt or something worse happens, or if he actually steals something, but you just feel like dirty and you feel...
Yeah, it's like a gross violation.
Yeah. So I was definitely shaken up after that, and I was just like angry, and I'm glad I didn't find the guy again, because I was like in my confused, angry state. I kind of like went looking for him to confront him, but probably not a good idea looking back at it, you know? Okay, so Barcelona, rented a car, drove to Huesca in northeastern Spain, and then drove around northern Spain, through Andorra, and into the Pyrenees in southern France, up through Nice, and then kind of on that border there of Italy and France, doing canyons there, drove back. After we returned the car, we pretty much just took buses and trains up through France, through Toulouse. God, I could just like probably talk about this route for a long time. Let me try to just like bottom line it. I know, it's like...
Yeah, you don't have to tell us every single part, country to country.
Yeah, okay.
And I remember you left for Europe, if I recall correctly, when I talked to you, for two reasons. One, because it was pricey there, and two, because of a visa issue, right? Like you were only allowed to be in the country for so many months.
Right. So as Americans with the Schengen zone. We get 3 months out of 6 months. So you basically have 90 days out of 180 days to be in the Schengen zone in Europe, which is kind of a funny thing because I theoretically could spend more time in China than I can in Europe as an American, which is just kind of something that you wouldn't think. Now, that being said, I don't think they really enforce it all that much. I think it's when you're flying out of certain airports they might check, but I was just planning this for years and like probably overthinking everything when it came to visas and stuff. But we had already spent 90 days out of, and it hadn't been 180 days yet since the first trip to Europe. So yeah, I decided to exit the Schengen zone through Croatia. I believe we were on a...
And what is the Schengen zone? Is that Eastern Europe?
No. The Schengen zone is like a collection of countries. Visa-wise, it includes all the way from Spain, Portugal, and Western Europe, all the way to Slovenia, Italy, Austria, Poland, I think is part of it, all the way up to like Norway, Sweden, Finland. There's no borders per se through these countries, and the visa, you get a visa for one and it applies to all of them. It's mostly like where the euro is accepted. That's like a rough idea of where it is, but there's like countries that are being added to it. And so Croatia is not part of that. They're kind of like on their way to be there. So we went to Croatia first to exit that Schengen zone. But then we went to Slovenia and then back to Croatia. I don't know. We might have gone to Slovenia twice because it's just right there. And we're driving through the border from Croatia to Slovenia. Literally, at one point, the guys are watching football, so soccer for us Americans, without looking away from the TV, reaches over, grabs a passport, stamps it, gives it back. With all my months and months of worrying about the Schengen zone, I'm like, this is like some pretty tight security here.
Yeah, so what you're teaching everyone listening is if you want to travel throughout Europe and you're worried about visas, just make sure you cross the border during any live soccer events because you have a better chance.
Exactly. They do love their soccer in Europe. All seriousness aside, the takeaway would be like, don't try to overplan it. Don't try to like plan everything. You can't, and it's overwhelming.
Yeah, clearly, because you started to go for 6 months and 3 years later, you're still on the other side of the globe.
Yeah, exactly.
So how long did you travel through Europe then? I mean, obviously you left for a bit and came back. Does that mean of the 3 years, you've only spent 6 months in Europe?
Yeah, so it was about 3 months in Western Europe in the Schengen zone. And then with Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, and Greece, it was probably another 3 months. So that was a kind of a pivotal point when I was in Croatia and more specifically in Mostar and Bosnia, because I started learning about the firsthand experiences of the Bosnian Serbo-Croat War. I think it's called something like that. The war in the 90s between the former Yugoslavian countries. I started talking to people about what communism was like back then and fighting and all these things. And that kind of set me on a path, which I'm still kind of pursuing now. And it's just like talking to people and learning about them and about their stories and about who they are and their culture and like really delving into their lives and beliefs and history and trying to document that in some way. And then subsequently, that kind of reignited my passion for people photography. So that has just kind of grown into what it is now that I'm settling down in Vietnam and doing more of that.
Is that the thing that kind of most surprised you on the trip? Is that you thought this trip was going to be about going to different locales and then you discovered that you're going to be even more interested in the people and the cultures?
Definitely. You know, I love adventure and I love kind of the unknown and beautiful places, but the connections and stuff with the people and learning from them, talking to them, learning about how, their views are different, and it just changes kind of the way you look at the world, and you kind of want more experiences like that where you're interacting with people. It's more meaningful, I think, and that definitely kind of surprised me. It's not like you're just ticking off countries, and also it makes you slow down more and try to see the places. Sometimes I feel like I'm going too slow through the places, but when you're learning stuff and talking to people, like I just want to learn more and talk to more people. So then that becomes more of the goal than just like seeing the Great Wall, and seeing all the sights.
Yeah, are there any particular experiences that stand out? Like when you think back to the last few years, something that pops to mind immediately and like holds significance for you?
Yes. In Mostar, there was this man We were actually staying in his, he had an Airbnb, and so he gave us a tour around the city. His name was Sasha. He was fighting in the war basically to protect his city. I actually wrote this up as a Facebook post at the time, but this is like kind of a pivotal moment for me, or like something that opened my eyes. He was just telling me his, first-hand account of fighting in the war. And if you know Mostar, if you go there, it still has a lot of buildings that are riddled with shrapnel and just like left that are like decaying. Like the war is a very recent thing and it's very evident. Just talking to him about the war and about fighting, he was fighting against some of his like good friends. And it just seemed all so pointless. And I watched documentaries about it from both sides. It's kind of a confusing thing, and there's a lot of racism from Croats, Bosniaks, and Serbs against each other. But I remember him telling me about one night they kind of stopped fighting and they just like drank and played music together, and then the next day they were fighting against each other again. And he took me to the spots, like the exact location where he was running for cover into a building when a sniper hit his friend, and his friend's body, like the upper half of his body, got blown apart, or he got hit by shrapnel or something. But he was like right there when his friend got hit and exploded in front of him. And he showed me all these locations, and it was just all very real. And then you read about the history and he talked to them why they were fighting, and it just doesn't make sense. And then a bit of a comic relief, he told me about, he was very thankful to the U.S. because he was eating pigeons for a long time, and then the U.S. airdropped chicken a la king.
USA.
Yeah.
USA.
For him, he always remembers chicken a la king, thank you, America. But that kind of had me wondering about the war and talking to people about the communism in Yugoslavia before it split up. Every country kind of blames the other country, and then the Serbs usually put the blame on the US for starting the war like secretly. So who knows whose fault all this stuff really is. You can like read about it and watch documentaries, but it all just seems like pointless racism. So they're all racist towards each other. And I also realized Islam. So a lot of the Bosniaks are Muslim, and there's all this racism against them. But it's a different form of Islam than in the Middle East. But DNA-wise, everybody in that area, like Bosniaks, Croats, Serbs, they're more closely related to each other than with anyone else. I feel like people are just taught these racist things and taught to hate other people that are different from them when they're younger, and it just perpetuates this thing that just keeps going and going. And then when I see people in the US now and talking about Islam, and this is Islam, they're talking about one specific thing in a specific country, how that culture has interpreted Islam, and then they say that's all Muslims. I'm like, well, no, that's like, you don't understand, because there's also Islam, a form of Islam in Vietnam. Things like this that just make you think about like war and racism and different cultures, and it's very eye-opening.
It all comes down to humans' ability to just generalize entire groups of people based on one defining factor, and then using that to justify atrocities.
Exactly, yeah. And so there was this massacre in Bosnia called the Srebrenica massacre, and basically the UN just stood back and didn't do anything because they didn't want to interfere. And all of these Bosniaks were slaughtered, and they kind of put the blame on the UN, like, this more powerful force didn't come in and stop this massacre from happening. Then it made me think about it, because I was very like anti-American involvement in any war overseas. But then it's like, being a powerful military, you also have the responsibility to prevent bad people from doing things or, massacres. So you can't just like hang up your hat and say, well, you can do whatever you want. You guys can kill each other. It's not my problem. Like, I think bigger countries that have better military have a responsibility, but then it becomes like, well, who decides? And obviously there's all kinds of corruption and economic gains and stuff to be had. But just when it comes down to it, war is not black and white. I understand you can't just be like, oh, we shouldn't get involved. You can't just say that. There are cases where you have to go in and prevent bad people from doing things.
There's also all the mixed things where sometimes we were already involved and we worsened the situation, so then we're obligated to try to fix the problems. And then there's still this concept that goes all the way back to World War II, when we said, well, we're going to sit this one out. And then by choosing to do that, it eventually came our way regardless. You can only sit back for so long before somebody else's problem becomes your problem.
Yeah, I agree. That being said, I think we're probably a little bit too involved in wars that probably shouldn't be happening. But you can't just look at it black and white. Like, there are bad people in the world and you have to prevent them from doing bad things. So it's just not black and white how some people might see it.
There's so many variables too, right? Like, there's so much culture, there's so much history behind everything. Like, no single individual can parse all the data to figure out what the actual situation is. So we're all just trying to figure out with limited data what we need to do and what the issues are and what the solutions could be.
Yeah, I agree.
So you're talking about all these things that, I mean, are pretty in depth that you've learned from traveling, which brings up another topic, which is you're talking about countries where English is not the primary language, if it's a language at all. What's it been like trying to communicate with people across Europe and Asia who speak different languages from you?
So in the former Yugoslavian countries, I guess it'd be like the Balkan states, the people that I did talk to in depth, they spoke English. I started asking people, like random working people in Croatia, did you like Croatia before? Because their communism was a kind of a unique form of communism under Tito. Most of the people that I talked to, kind of the working class, liked it better when it was Yugoslavia, when it was communist. That being said, if you complained during the Tito times, you just disappeared. So it's definitely not like butterflies and rainbows. I'm not saying communism is good. I'm just, trying to understand the people and the outlook and the way of life and how it's changed. So I spoke to an Arab man who was our guide climbing Mount Sinai, which is also called Mount Moses, on the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt, which is historically has kind of been a contested territory. He kind of opened my eyes a little bit to Islam and, the conflict over there. One quick example, when I entered Palestine for the first time, so we had taken, I believe it was a bus or train, and then we took a taxi from Jerusalem to the border, and that is like kind of a surreal experience. Jerusalem itself is pretty well developed, and then you go through this like wall, this big wall, lots of security, military. Once you're on the other side, it's like the contrast is pretty high. We just like walked in and there's like trash everywhere and like crumbling, dilapidated houses. Like I was scared at first. There was a guy burning a fire. I mean, it looked like something from a movie, like a war-torn town, for example. That's not all of Palestine, but that was my first impression when I went across the border at night, when we did. And we talked to the guy, it was a cab driver. This was another one of those experiences that just like stuck with me. We were driving to the Airbnb. We were staying in Bethlehem over Christmas, actually, because it's so much cheaper than staying in Jerusalem.
Yeah, man. That's why Jesus stayed there.
Right. I have a joke about that in a second, or a kind of a funny thing. There's this picture in Bethlehem of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph trying to get into Jerusalem, and there's a wall from Bethlehem to Jerusalem. They can't get in. That's how it is. So we're sitting in this cab. It's late at night, and there's this Palestinian man, and I see like his little ID or taxi ID, and I said, "Oh, is that your passport?" And he said, "What's a passport?" And I was like, the document so you can travel, like, to different countries? He says, "No, we can't leave." I was like, "What?" And that kind of opened my eyes a bit, and I started reading more about it, and it's just a big mess. But the bottom line is a lot of those people can't leave the country that they're in. I mean, just think about that. Like, you can't leave. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there are channels for certain people to go through to be able to cross the border, but, just by and large, you can't just like buy a flight and leave your country. Without picking sides of like right and wrong, I think that's a bit of a human rights issue. So that kind of opened my eyes and made me start looking further and further and, reading about the history and stuff, and without going into all the stuff and my views on politics in that region. It's just, that's another thing where it's just like not black and white. But in that instance, I was able to talk to the guy in like a bit of English.
One of the things I think is interesting is, and we kind of talked about it earlier as well, is you were like, I'm going to go there for 6 months and then just check out these other places, but you've really fallen into these people's stories and histories and cultures and just, the strife and such that that exists across the world. And I'm sure you can't just sum it up in like a sentence or so, but how do you feel that just your perspective in general has shifted from 3 years ago to today?
Yeah, that's, I guess, more understanding of all the differences and how similar we actually all are. You know, we can celebrate our differences and not alienate ourselves because we are, at the end of the day, all born the same. You know, if you raise someone from Palestine in the US, they'll be American. You know, it's all affected by how we're raised. I think we should celebrate our differences and also celebrate our similarities. And I've just gotten a lot better understanding, but I also feel like the more I learn about, the more I don't know about other cultures and, you know, places I haven't been, even places I have been. You know, I feel like you could stay there so much longer, but just kind of understanding people better and situations that I've heard about growing up in the news in the US, and then you go there and it's just a different situation. So you just have more of an understanding of, you know, what is going on. And when something is mentioned in the media and you've been there or have like a personal experience in that region, you just have more of an understanding of what's going on. But I feel like kind of one of the takeaways is how similar we all are. We have a lot of differences, but at the end of the day, like, we all want the same things. We all want to have a house, to have a home, to have family, you know, some people to love. We all need to eat and sleep and have connections with people. And I feel like a lot of the differences are by the way that we're taught when we're raised. You know, you're taught to hate certain people and cultures, even through kind of subliminal means. Oh, one thing I was going to say is in our media and movies, we have this like underlying fear of Muslims and Islam. And I realized this when I went to Mostar, which is the city I was talking about before in Bosnia. And they have the call to prayer, the Islam call to prayer. Is that kind of like singing, droning on of like Allah. And I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's in like all the Muslim movies when they're like going to the Middle East and like trying to find a terrorist, for example.
Yeah, I was hiking out of the Grand Canyon one morning and there was a group of Muslims hiking that was ahead of us. And yeah, it was time to pray to Mecca, and they had set up on the side of one of the switchbacks. And they were probably like a mile ahead of us, and we could just hear the singing like echoing through the Grand Canyon as we were making our way up there. It was really interesting.
Yeah. And I don't know how you felt in that experience, but when I remember hearing all the mosques, my gut reaction is like fear or uneasiness. And then I was like, why? Why is that? I believe it's because all of these movies since you're a kid, you know, Black Hawk Down, it's like all this creepy, you're going into the danger zone, you know, when you hear that, it's like you're in foreign territory and you might get killed.
Yeah, I mean, there's that fear of what you don't know, and then there's the fear of other people having fear of you because they don't understand you either.
So traveling kind of challenges all of these stereotypes that you have and kind of opens your mind. I think you have to travel, and I tried to do this, travel with an open mind or question your prejudices. Like, why do I think this about this race? It's not even like you're trying to be racist. It's just we have certain ideas, you know, based on the way that we're raised on how certain races are. And that was an example of like one way that applies to our preconceived ideas to other races. So I think when you travel, you just have to try to open your mind and challenge your kind of built-in racial prejudices. And it's good.
I think a lot of what you're saying is often what happens with people when they travel, because it's easy to have preconceived notions about things or fear of things or disdain for things that you don't have to experience firsthand. And then as soon as you do, I think oftentimes people have that same reaction you're having, which is, oh, fuck, man, we're really a lot alike. These little differences could make us more interesting instead of frightening to each other.
Right.
And so I think it's awesome that you're getting to see that on such a grand scale by traveling so far across 2 separate continents. Or I guess technically 3, because once you drop down into Egypt, you're technically in Africa by that point.
Ah, yeah, exactly.
So you've been gone for 3 years, dude. We could talk for like 5 weeks about all these experiences. Let's shift gears, because I know you've been in Asia for a long time. Let's talk about once you got on a motorcycle and what that was like, and why you've ended up in Vietnam and what's going on there.
Yeah, so when I flew from China to Ho Chi Minh City, also known as Saigon, And I bought a motorcycle there and drove around the Mekong Delta for a few days. And then I hadn't driven an actual manual motorcycle since I was 17. So I had to relearn driving in the traffic of Saigon. And let me tell you, that is like not the place to do it. It is like fucking stress level off the charts, man. There's just like no rules. Like people go through red lights. People drive on the wrong side of the road. You know, they say in Vietnam, if it's a one-way street, you still look both ways. People drive on the sidewalk. People come into traffic and don't even look at the oncoming traffic. They just assume that you're going to go around them. As crazy as it sounds, there is kind of an order to the chaos, but it is still dangerous here to drive. I'm always cautious and kind of, if there's any situation that I don't feel comfortable with, I mean, you know, like people going all these different directions or like going through red lights, I just slow down and ease through it. Because if you have an accident and you're going slow, accident's a lot less painful.
I'm going to interrupt you for a quick second and go piss in my yard.
Oh, you better not edit that out.
Yeah, I won't.
Jason is pissing in his yard. I hope you enjoyed your intermission.
I enjoyed it. I just emptied about a liter out of my bladder.
Dang, dude, did you do it into a Camelback just in case you run out of water later?
Yeah, just in case I need it later. Put a little charcoal in there. Good to go.
Survival situations first, man.
I might be able to get a show on Discovery Channel if I keep that up. So you were talking about driving around on that motorcycle and the wackiness of that.
Yeah, so I relearned how to drive a manual motorcycle in Saigon. You know, actually, one of the things that I really liked about Saigon, not going to say canyoneering because there's no canyoneering, the dog and cat cafes.
Yeah, you like to post pictures of you with cats all over the world. You really discovered your love of cats, didn't you?
And dogs. Hey, don't leave dogs out.
You discovered your love for humans and animals. Look at that.
It's funny because when I was in Europe, we'd always save our leftovers and feed the dogs and cats. Actually, in Croatia, I rescued a golden retriever from the ocean from drowning.
Wait, yeah, how did this happen?
We were on this island, I think it was Cress, camping, and there was this golden retriever like out in the water, like grabbing onto something or doing something, and Mika actually saw it first. And she was telling me, like, I think something's wrong. I was like, it's fine. Golden retrievers are water dogs. But then, you know, after like 5 minutes, she's like, no, like, you need to go in there and I'm a better swimmer than her. And so I went down there and his owner was there and she couldn't go in the water. I forget the exact reason. I think she just wasn't a very good swimmer. And I swam out there and the dog, I guess, was not letting go of something and he was like choking on water. There was like a buoy out there and he was somehow like grabbing onto it and not letting go to the point that he was like coughing and choking and taking water. And so I basically just like removed his mouth from it, grabbed the dog and started swimming back towards shore. And then she swam out when I was out there, and then we both kind of came back in, and the dog was like coughing up water like all night, or at least for some time after that. And then we ran into her the next day and she was like, oh my God, you saved my dog's life. It was amazing. I'm like so happy. And then invited us back to her home in Austria.
Did you go?
No, I never went because, well, we had plans in Croatia and Bosnia and such.
Sweet. So when you make your way to Austria eventually, you got a place to stay.
Yeah. How did we get onto that? Oh, dogs and cats. So
dog and cat cafes. That's your thing now.
I remember one time, you can edit this out, but just reminded me. I remember one time I was in Sarajevo, which is the capital of Bosnia. I was walking by a mosque and this Muslim woman walked out and there was this black lab. He was coming up and she said to me, he doesn't want food, just love. And I just like knelt down and I was petting him. And whenever I stopped, he then would put his paw on my leg, like, keep going. It's actually, there's a picture of me that Mika took that's of the dog like with his paw on my leg. It's kind of funny. So the dog and cat cafes in Saigon, I went to one and then it kind of just, I wanted to see like all of them. When you go into a cat cafe and you're able to get some treats, like some cat treats, if you like cats and you have a bag of treats, 10 or 15 cats just want nothing else but to walk on you, like it's pretty cool.
Yeah, for me, that would be terrifying. Since I'm allergic, I would die within moments.
Right. But it's fun, and I'm definitely a dog and a cat person, and when you don't have your own and you can go to a place and interact with them, it's pretty cool. I really enjoyed it. So I went and visited as many as I could. And there's actually also a reptile pet cafe, reptile and amphibians. So not as cuddly, but equally cool, I guess. Like lizards, frogs, snakes, giant iguana. So that was kind of cool. That was a side to Saigon that I really liked, because Saigon can get really hot and kind of busy and at times a little bit off-putting. And, if you're out traveling around during the day in the city, it's just not exactly my cup of tea. It's a little bit too busy for me. So I found a side to it that I really enjoyed, which was the dog and cat cafes.
This is quite a shift from the experiences you were having in Bosnia and Palestine.
Right. You got to experience, when in Rome, I guess. So having the motorcycle driving through Vietnam, the country is opened up to you. You can go anywhere. And one night I was driving, I think it was kind of still in the southern half of Vietnam, and I was driving kind of along the coast, and I drove out on this peninsula, just parked in this little fishing village, and I was having dinner there, and the guys knew like just a few words of English and then Google Translate. So we somehow communicate that like, wake up tomorrow and we'll take you out on the water. At first I thought they were fishermen, but I think that was a misunderstanding. They were just visiting. It was almost no communication, but basically like, stay here and we'll go out on the ocean tomorrow is pretty much the gist of what the Google Translate helped me understand from them. And so I just set up my tent there, like right in the yard. One thing I realized is the Vietnamese love their karaoke. You can be out in the farthest reaches of the countryside and guaranteed in the town there will be at least a few karaoke machines, if not a karaoke joint. So I was in this fishing village, and the house I was gonna camp, in the yard of, they had a giant like 3-foot speaker, and they, made me do karaoke.
What's your go-to song?
There's this country song. It's called Private Malone by David Ball. Being in Vietnam is kind of interesting because it's about a guy getting a car, a Corvette, but he gets it from a guy who died fighting in the Vietnam War, who's Private Malone. So it's kind of an interesting song to sing when you're over here. But anyway, that's kind of like my go-to thing because I know like pretty much all the words. So that's the song you go to when...
Dude, that is way different than my go-to karaoke song.
What is yours?
Mine's Rick James, Super Freak.
There's like 3 lines in that song, Jason. Come on, get creative, man. You gotta do.
No, what are you talking about, man? Super Freak's got like lots of verses.
Does it? I don't even remember.
Do you need me to go through the whole damn song right now? You got 5 minutes?
Okay, all right. I'll listen to it and imagine.
Come on, she's a very kinky girl, the kind you don't take home to mother. She will never let your spirits down when you get her off the street. Oh, girl.
That's pretty much the song.
That's only a small
it?
sample. That is just the very beginning of the song. There's much more after that.
A little rusty.
But anyway... We have digressed. You were going out onto the ocean with some people you could barely communicate with after you sang karaoke.
So in this group, this goes back to what we were talking about before of like, how do you connect to the people that don't speak your language? Well, sometimes it's like you fumble through Google Translate, which has been a lot of my driving by myself through Vietnam. What it was kind of defined by is situations like that. So the next day we'd go out onto the ocean with this little circular boat called a coracle. And oh my God, like I love Vietnam. That's usually preceded by something that's slightly negative, right? When you say I love it, but there's not really like the standards on certain things on like safety are just sometimes non-existent. So we go out on the circular boat. I think there's about 6 of us in the boat, 5 or 6 of us. I have a picture of it I can send you. I actually don't know what's happening still. Like nobody speaks English. So we're out in the boat and the dude like goes overboard and he starts this like battery operated pump And then he takes like this 30-foot tube from the pump and sticks it in his mouth and then goes underwater. And like,
oh, so this was his version of scuba?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's not scuba because it's not, okay, yeah.
Well, yeah. It's not self-contained.
Yeah. So like this little hose.
So it's his version of Uba. Yeah.
And I look underwater, like the water's pretty clear, and I stick my GoPro under, and he basically goes down. He opens this giant cage. I would guess maybe the cage underwater is like 12 feet by about 12 feet. And then there's like a little hatch in the top, and he goes in, and our freaking boat, the coracle, starts drifting away, and it becomes clear to me that nobody in the boat knows how to row a circular boat. And let me tell you, when you don't row a circular boat properly, you just go in circles.
Right, of course.
You have to do like a figure eight. But we're drifting farther and farther from this guy's, like, I'm like, dude, he's under the water, like with this little tube. Like, what's happening? So the boat is drifting further and further with the little tube of air. Like the pump's still going, but I'm like, what's going to happen when we're too far? So we finally get to a point where the boat is just taut, and the dude, still underwater, pulls us back in with the air tube while he's still underwater. I'm just like,
was he doing some sort of fishing, like collecting crabs or something?
Yeah, so what I found out later is they use these cages as a refrigerator. Well, they don't have refrigerators, so they'll buy a bunch of fish and sea animals, crustaceans, what have you, and they'll just put it in the ocean. And then when they need something, they'll just...
Oh, and then retrieve it later?
Yeah. It's genius.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. At the time, I thought it was a trap of some kind, a fish trap or something.
Right.
But no, it's like a giant underwater fridge for seafood. They just are alive. So then we came back and had this amazing seafood dinner and went to another guy's house, and he had like some big party celebrating someone's birthday, and they just like welcomed me with open arms. These guys were just like super, like just met me, total random stranger. I camped in this woman's yard, and I just like hung out with them all day and ate and drank like all day. Amazing seafood, drank beer. They just totally welcomed me into their crowd. It was amazing. And that kind of is some of the hospitality you can experience in Vietnam as a foreigner. Embracing things like that, just kind of putting yourself out there and just kind of embracing the unknown can lead to some amazing experiences with total strangers, which is one of the magic aspects of traveling. And so in Vietnam, it was just like driving through the country, learning about the people and just having experiences like that, and just like seeing the country on a motorbike, which is, it's so addicting because it's just like you can go anywhere. And so it's like, where do you go? You just like start driving and, you know, stop when you want to, where you want to. It's great.
Yeah. So what's made you decide to stay specifically in that country and kind of set up shop? Like you started a business there, right?
Yeah. So things kind of came together, I guess. It just felt like the right time to settle down here in Hoi An, teaching photography and working on these other projects that kind of started back in Croatia and Bosnia. I really like Vietnam, you know, being able to travel around the country. People in the countryside are like very friendly. And another thing about Vietnam, in an odd way, I can relate to some of the people because of my upbringing in Scientology on the farm. We did a lot of manual labor, a lot of physical farming without much heavy equipment. So a lot of the things that they do out here, we had similar ways of doing them when I was growing up. So in some way, it's like you can connect with the people like that, or I can rather. And then being able to just drive around and stop at random places whenever you want. I really like China, but I couldn't drive a motorbike like across China. There might be a way, but it's just a little bit more controlled in China. So being here, you know, I can do that.
It's also enormous. Yeah.
Yeah, China is a lot bigger than Vietnam, but I haven't even seen all of Vietnam yet. So, but now, yeah, I decided to settle here and, you know, do these other photography projects and teach photography.
Yeah. So tell us about this business. What's it look like?
So it's called Hoi An 360 Photography Tours and Workshops, and I wanted to do something that combines my passion for people and kind of that personal connection and photography. So my girlfriend Trin and I, we do these tours together. So you have this local aspect to it. She talks to the people. She's a certified tour guide. She is very good with people, very gregarious and friendly, and can connect with the people very well. It's a lot more personal, I think, than most any other tour that I've heard about or read, at least in this area. And we both have the same interest. She was actually doing something, or she wanted to do something similar, or had started doing something similar that I was doing in terms of like talking and connecting with the people and learning about them before we met, that is. And so it kind of is a good combination because we both go out. She's very good connection. She's also a photographer, so she can take pictures as well. So when we do the tour, she connects with the people in a way that I feel like only a Vietnamese person can. And then I'm teaching more of the photography side. So we have personal and cultural connection. So the person that goes out can understand and connect with the people a lot more and a lot closer than you could with, let's say, just a foreigner. And then I can teach them like specific photography things to help capture that person, in a picture. My theory on it is kind of evolved over this whole time of let's slow down and get to know the people, because I feel like just random portraits of people doesn't really have a lot of meaning, and especially in today's world where there's just pictures of everything and everyone. So if we just like slow down and get to know people more and connect with them, then you can take a much better picture of them. And so that's kind of how we both go about it, and kind of how the company was founded, and that's our MO and how we go about photographing people. It's a very personal connection.
Yeah, I mean, a really good portrait of somebody kind of captures their personality, right? So if you don't know anything about them, it's kind of hard to figure out how to capture that.
I totally agree. So Hoi An can get pretty touristy, like in the old town. It feels a little bit like Disneyland at times at night. There's a lot of lights, like lanterns, and just a lot of people. So I feel like travelers sometimes, if they're just coming here quickly, they just want like a picture of somebody, and they just, an interesting face. And people get kind of relegated to a curiosity, it was
right,
like
a souvenir.
Yeah, where it's like, oh, let me take this picture and maybe either win a competition or show my friends about how amazing my portraiture is. And I feel like we need to slow down a little bit and actually try to connect with the people first. Even before I was just traveling by myself, and I couldn't connect with the people in a way, learn their stories just because of a language barrier. I'll give you one quick example. I was driving through central Vietnam, and I saw this woman like sorting chilies, and I stopped my motorcycle and got off and just went over and like sat down next to her. And I just was very curious about what they were doing and how they were doing it. And of course the chilies like caught my eye. They're very bright red. And I just like sat down, tried to translate through Google Translate. Everybody was laughing at me except for this baby who started crying. To me, it was more about the interest in them first, like what they're doing, who they are, and like connecting to them. After that, then I was like, I motioned like the clicking, like, can I take a picture? And they were very open to it. And then I was able to take some pictures there, and it was great. It was like some kind of connection, laughing, connecting with them. Can't really understand each other, but understand a few things. And then, you get a much better picture of them. That's the way I feel about, taking pictures of people.
So how are people finding out about these tours they can take with you guys?
We do have a lot of word of mouth. Someone hears about it from someone else. Actually, yesterday we just had a workshop, and yesterday morning, and someone said, I was at Carnival in Brazil, and I ran into this woman who was like raving about your tour in Hoi An. So then, when she came here, then she looked us up and did our tour.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. So you can say world famous, right?
Yeah.
Like K-Rock.
Yeah. You can be like the hamburger places, #1 best photography, world known tours.
So, online is another way, word of mouth. I designed this brochure along with Trin. So our brochure. And then sometimes I get a sandwich board and walk around Old Town. No shirt on? No, I don't do that. Jason's like, what? Wait, what?
Can you do that?
I don't know.
Would you do that?
No, I definitely would not do that.
Well, what about if maybe you got like an arrow that had the name of your tour on it and you spun it around.
Where would it point?
I think that's really effective.
I'll think about it in my list of ideas.
So how long have you been doing these tours now?
I guess Trin and I started in August last year, August 2018. I definitely learned a lot about business and starting a business. It's a lot of work and expense, if you're trying to do it right. But yeah, so that's how long, since August last year, and now it's April.
That's 8 months.
Yeah, give or take, and mid-August maybe.
And you've been traveling on this 6-month trip for 3 years. What do you think you foresee for yourself in the future? And do you think you'll ever return to the U.S., or do you think you'll just either stay in Vietnam or stay there for a little while and then continue to travel elsewhere and sincerely be a nomad?
Right. That is a good question. I would like to do some meaningful projects. And I have some ideas in the works, but something that is more meaningful to me in regards to people and culture. I have some ideas, but I haven't fully developed anything yet, and I don't want to talk about them prematurely. But I would like to do something that kind of is more meaningful than other things, other jobs I've done, let's say, to bring maybe cultural awareness or understanding. And it helps me because I think teaching is actually a great way to also learn for yourself, because you see how other people look at things. And as an artist, it is interesting. I try to keep an open mind about other people. For example, a student will do something a certain way. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So it kind of helps me learn as well. So I feel like teaching, it's a good thing. And how I teach, I really stress cultural awareness and respecting other people when you photograph them. To some small degree, I feel like it does do some good when you teach people about culture and the people they're photographing, so they become a more kind of enlightened traveler or person, and treat people, I hope, with more respect when they photograph them and understand them a bit more.
Right, because it's kind of easy to ignorantly exploit people unintentionally.
Totally, definitely. It's not on par with some of the other problems I've witnessed around the world, but it's something that has some meaning. Like teaching people, it definitely has some meaning for me. I feel like it's a good thing to do, and I enjoy it. And it's also good because we always give back to the people that we photograph. I mean, I have a stack of pictures here in my desk that we still need to find from people in the countryside. And this is like someone, in a rice field planting rice, and we take a picture and then we print it. And then we try to go find that person again, which can be hard because a lot of times they don't have a cell phone or we can't get their number. And then we just have to, when we're in the countryside, just hope to run into them again to give it to them. For me, I think photography is meant to be shared, especially with the people that you photograph. So I always try to get that picture at least once. Sometimes I give multiple pictures. And people that we have more connections with, I try to give bigger, more meaningful pictures. I'll give you an example. I met this man. Trin and I were driving through the countryside, and we saw this guy just in his rice field. Trin has very good intuition, and we both just kind of felt like going over and talking to him. So we just went over talking to him. Really nice guy, has this organic farm. Overall, just gregarious, happy, loves to meet people, loves to learn about people from other countries. And, after a few times of meeting him, he asked if we could photograph his wife who's dying of cancer. And so we met his wife and took some pictures of her. And this was, late last year. We saw her a few times after that. I actually printed one of the pictures and gave it to her. I remember the moment I gave her the picture, and then I kind of stepped out of the room. She was in this little room in bed, and I looked at her, how she was touching the picture, and her face, she was just this big smile on her face. It was a picture of her and her husband, this man, Penn. It was so meaningful, and being able to give that to someone doesn't cost much, and it doesn't take that much effort. Being able to give that to someone, I feel like that is one of the reasons for being a photographer, to share that with somebody. So doing things like that where you can bring some joy to somebody, and in this case, at the end of their life, it's a lot more meaningful than just, walking by somebody and sneaking a picture of them and then showing your friends look at this great picture I got of this person and their wrinkled face, for example. So then after that, we saw her a few times, and then she has since passed. And then Trin and I came back with a very big picture of her, like life size, of her and her husband on wood, gave it to him, and he mounted it in his house. And he told us that now when the kids miss their mom, they all come and look at the picture in their house. So yeah, that was just very meaningful. It was like, experiences like that, giving something to them that's very meaningful gives a lot more reason to take pictures. You're not just taking pictures for likes or for Instagram.
I think that's super cool that you've traveled across the world, discovered people in a certain kind of way, rediscovered your photography, and then now you're bringing them together. And I do like that instead of just going around and capturing photos of things, you're also trying to figure out ways to share these things with people in a way that'll mean something for them. And that's really awesome that, he has that now and that his kids have that.
Yeah, exactly. It just brings another reason to photograph. It's like to give something to them. It's not just, I feel like photography should be more of a giving thing as well. Sometimes it isn't that. Yeah, there was another woman who lost her leg during the war, and we just met her randomly. So she has one leg, and we gave her a picture, and she told us, like, this is the first time I've gotten a picture of myself. And then we came back later, and we asked her about the picture, and she said, no, her family took it to show all of her relatives in, like, the south of Vietnam. She was very confused. She goes, why does everybody have my picture on their phone? What had happened, we posted it on Facebook. This is in the countryside, and someone found it and like shared it with a bunch of friends, and then people kept coming up to her showing her photo with her cat on their phones. And it was just it was like a kind of a funny thing. So yeah, there's all kinds of like things like this and stories of people that we've given pictures to. And we've had people who are really poor, and we just like go back and we'll give them, I don't know, rice, like a big bag of rice. Or like this woman, the one I just mentioned, her name is C, and she, the one with one leg. And on Christmas, we went and gave her like a big bag of gifts, and it was the first time she had ever experienced Christmas. You build certain connections with people, and it's a lot more meaningful.
Well, man, I think it's really awesome that you wanted to do this trip for yourself, and then it's evolved into this other thing, and sincerely, it's completely changed your life. You live in another country, you've traveled across so many different places and gotten all these different experiences. But of course, we only have so much time we can record this, and only so long we can expect people to listen.
Right. I think so it's way beyond that.
I don't know. I think you'll be surprised. But we should go into the wrap up. So let's do the usual. Let's let people know where they can keep up with the stuff you're doing, because I know you write blog posts and you've done some about different places you've visited along the way, and then also where they can find your business online now, and then anything else like that you want to share with people, Instagram, whatever else.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff, I haven't posted on Instagram for a few weeks, but a lot of kind of the updates of the people that we're meeting is posted on Instagram. I try to make my Instagram posts more meaningful and a lot more thought out, so sometimes I don't post for a while. That would be probably the best thing is Instagram, at least initially, and that is at 360 Nomad, 360, and then NOMAD. That's the Instagram handle. And then our website for the photography tours, I like to say it's photography and culture tours, because it really is. We teach about the culture of the people and the people themselves. And that is hoian360.com, HOIAN360.com, hoian360.com. Started another website, but I haven't really designed anything, but the website's there. It's called vietnamthepeople.com. So that will post some of the stories, probably a little bit more in detail from the Instagram accounts of the people. So that's kind of an up and coming. It's not quite there yet. My travel blog, but this is more about like some guides to places I've been, and that's 360nomad.org. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I would say Instagram is really like the best thing, most interesting. If you come to Hoi An and you want to, learn photography or even just connect with the people, sometimes we have people that just have their cell phones and they just are more interested in the people and the culture, and it's a great way to do it. It's not just for professional photographers or aspiring professionals. Like, I've found the people who usually are more interested in the people and the culture, it's usually a little bit more fun, I think, for me at least, to take people, of course, photographers, but sometimes you have, okay, now Alden's rambling. Anyway.
And now it's that time for you to leave us with your final thought. We talked about a lot of stuff, so what do you want to leave people with based on all that stuff we've talked about?
Well, when I go canyoneering, I like to pick up trash, and I know other
and a lot of other canyoneers do too.
Yeah, I think there are a few little bits of advice I would say. I think everybody should, at some point in their lives, try to travel on a trip that is aimed more at kind of connecting with the people, or like not like going to the Bahamas for a week, but actually like going to a country to learn about the country, learn about the people, and stay with the people. Obviously, it's more realistic for some people, but everybody should try to do it to some degree. And when you travel, to try to connect with the people and go out of the tourist areas and just, learn from the people who live there and find out about them and their history and who they are and their stories. Something that I think people should try to cut back on their debt. I think debt kind of weighs people down and prevents you from having freedoms and being able to travel. And I think we've kind of gotten into a society where we buy too many things on credit without having the money. I think you don't live to work, you work so that you can live. How's that? Is that too redundant? I already knew that before I traveled, right? So I would say...
I mean, hey, if you traveled around the world to learn the lesson you already learned, and that's what you want to share with people, then sure.
No, so there's like a lot of things, you kind of have to like formulate it into like a few things, and it is kind of hard, but one of the lessons, we just need to keep more of an open mind about other people in other countries and try to learn from the other side. Like, I realize, especially in our political climate in the US, we're all in our little echo chambers, and we should try to look at the other side and look at stories and learn from people that we don't usually talk to, and find out like the way they think and what their beliefs are and what, who they are. I think we need to just be more open-minded and less in our little worlds. And part of that is accomplished by, you can't accomplish that by traveling to countries where you don't really know of or know about or that scare you. Maybe not that scare you, but go a little bit outside of your comfort zone. I think that's when the magic happens. That's when you understand more, and that's when you have a bit of an adventure and can learn.
Yeah, and next time you're going to make an assumption about a person and just assume they're a villain, stop for a moment and instead assume that they're probably like you and they probably have reasons, and then see if you can look at it from their side. And then maybe if you understand them a little more, maybe they won't be a villain and you won't be a villain, and maybe something better can happen there.
Exactly. And I think traveling has made things like ideas that I've had. For example, that idea that you just summated, like try to understand the other side, that just becomes so much more clear when you're actually traveling and talking to people from different cultures and different religions. Just opening your mind and trying to understand the way they think and the way they live can just open up so many doors for you. And it just becomes so much more clear when you do it that it needs to be done, like to understand other people. It'll just help everyone. If more people traveled and tried to learn from other people that had totally different ways of life, I think our world would be so much of a better place. I think our politics would be more homogenous. We wouldn't have such a divisive time at things. And we like to label things: Republican, Democrat, Socialist, Communist, Capitalist, like when in reality, like things are beyond just like pigeonholing. We label it, and then it gets like too pigeonholed and too like pushed into that set of rules or definitions. I think that I could talk like another hour or two about communism, and I'm not a communist by any means, but just how much I feel that people just label it black and white, like capitalism versus communism or democracy versus communism. And it's just like, it's not that.
Alden wants you to look at the world as a yin-yang.
I could talk to you about yin yang and qi and Taoism and Confucianism too. Let me tell you. Actually, I listened to all these lectures on the history of the world, and it really fit in well with when I was traveling, because I could see where a lot of these cultures can trace their roots back to. It's the classic period, man. That's the key.
All right, dude. You had something good in there. Thanks for meeting me at morning time, your time, nighttime, my time, on opposite sides of the globe so we could record this thing. And I know there are a whole bunch of people around here that are going to be curious to listen in.
I think it'll be interesting to our mutual friends. And they'll probably have a lot more questions like, what about this? And what about this? What happened there?
Yeah, well, if we record like 20 more of these, then I guess we could potentially answer those questions.
Yeah.
We'll just start the Alden Traveling the World podcast next. And just each episode.
A lot of editing, a lot of rambling on, and then you're going to have to edit a lot of it.
And with that, I think we can stop recording on all sides here. Alden and Trin have begun selling prints of their photographs on their website, VietnamThePeople.com. Each photo comes with a story, as told by the person featured in that photograph, a certificate of authenticity, and is signed by Alden himself. But, more importantly, a portion of all sales goes back to the community and the people featured in those photographs. A great place to get a peek at what those photographs and stories are like is to go to the 360 Nomad Instagram page. And since you are heading to the internet to go to VietnamThePeople.com and 360 Nomad on Instagram, you may as well run over to our website, GoGetOutside.com. Look for this episode 85 and you will find numerous photographs of Alden in his travels and some of the photographs he has begun taking of the many people in Vietnam. There are also links to everything we talked about on today's show. Thanks again to Wild Woman Box for sponsoring this episode, and a reminder that if you go to wildwomanbox.com, you can get $5 off with the code GetOutside when you subscribe. And if you would like to get in touch with us here at this show, you can always send us an email, go@butcherbirdstudios.com, or perhaps you'd rather give us a call or send us a text. You could do that at 818-925-0106. And while you're at it, please run to your podcast purveyor of choice, subscribe to this show, rate it, review it, and share it with somebody. This episode of the Go Get Outside podcast was produced and recorded with additional editing by me, your host, Jason Milligan. It was edited by Griffin Davis. I'm sure he's very happy that I've left in his urine gag. And as always, brought to you by Butcherbird Studios. Next time on the show, come back June 1st for the end of Season 4. This next episode is a story I've been wanting to share since this podcast began. It is a story about a seminal moment in my outdoor experiences. The episode will be a retelling of the 7 days Stephen Calcote and I spent on the West Coast Trail in British Columbia, Canada, back in 2010. So come back June 1st and hear our tale of the West Coast Trail. See you then.